Pengenge con quattro spagnoli, sora un chino di un corredor. Maniatak tutu berki Elyssa Santos, sora un quattro jaldeska abjanya. Pengenge con quattro spagnoli, sora un chino di un corredor.
Right, half a day hamzo todos. Buena hudzong estigi on otro episode Fanachu. And if you were wondering what song was playing at the beginning, that is Guamanian medley from Gene Lennox, the album The Songs of Guam, back from 1969. And so because so many of you support Fanachu on Patreon, we have 230 of you that support Fanachu on Patreon right now. For every 15 new signups that we get, 30 more hard-to-find CHamoru vinyl songs are added to our YouTube page. And so don't forget, by signing up to support Fanachu on Patreon, you make possible our ability to pay 8 people every month to help produce content for Fanachu. Dr. Manny Cruz gets a stipend every month to create his Matapang's Canoe Club episodes. Nick Rice creates CHamoru ASMR. Desiree Perez makes Fanachu highlights. So if you can't watch a whole hour of my face talking to somebody, then Desiree puts it into 4 minutes. 4 minutes, a 4-minute highlight reel. And so www.patreon.com/Fanachu. For as little as $1 a month, you can support and you make possible all of the stuff that Fanachu does. All right, Enoha Parapago, that is it. That is enough sort of pitching, YouTube pitching, podcast pitching for now. Let's get into our guests for today. And so the focus today is on place names. We'll be talking with members from Kumision, Fino, CHamoru, who will be sharing the work that they have been doing in terms of documenting and also restoring our traditional place names on Guam. And sometimes people say, oh, these things aren't important. And to that, I always say, if you look behind me, my virtual background here, it's not mas bonito, bonitanya, idzonya si Underwood. Senor Underwood has a much more beautiful one than I do. But some of you, if you're a nerd about Guam history and literature and books like I am, you may recognize this drawing from Ben Bloss's book, Visita Guam. And so this is sort of an illustration of contact between Magellan and the Chamorros in 1521. And so whenever people say that names aren't important, I always remind them, what was it like for Guam to be called Ladrones and Chamorros to be called Ladrones for hundreds of years? Do you think that that was a good thing? Do you think that GVB would appreciate the challenge of still trying to sell the island of thieves to the world, especially after the pandemic closed downs? Imagine what it would be like if you're sending Pa'a, Tautotano cultural dancers to Japan saying, come and visit us, the island of thieves. We will steal your heart, not your wallet. Names do matter. Names do matter. They tell us a lot about where we come from, where we are. And for me, the way in which we respect and revere those names too, it often says a lot about what we value today. And so I'm so happy to have with us here today Dr. Robert Underwood and Senora Hope Cristobal from Kumision Fino CHamoru, as well as Elyssa Santos, who is a special projects coordinator for the Chamorro Language Commission. And so Dr. Underwood, if you want to get us started, what is this work? For those people who are unfamiliar with it, what is this work about restoring the place names? And then I know that one of the big things that people confuse, of course, is the different roles between government authorities and agencies over things such as village names and place names. Oh, ti o open house, senyor.
Okay, Jesus Masi Miguel, thank you very much. And I would like for the chair of the commission to say a few words before we begin, because she's the head of the outfit. I'm just a member.
Oh, Jesus Masi. Por favor, senhora.
Ai dispensa zu umimbili kekeraha zu paguna haoni. Ja sidus masi sa hanagi hamni link lo estina komitea magahit komisyon estigi san halong I komisyon Fino CHamoru. Ja donkuluno ilain ha pega gi apagan esti membro mami si Dr. Underwood na profit sigi I research estina so tu sa bula tetehnan tita sosoda nina an lugata zano intimasit mo na gahasaloki man makukunas no sa gahasa man nuevo na development sa meganya ha di tau sanhitong tenga dangin edja mas pinaanian no malago niya pro man aset di para naan ni lugar niya tegano I militar na banda no gahana maagang no Camp Blas Azulo si Panay Castro di ora dia di hasangani do na no sagan pinagadza ne zugato pa no teginian fasano sa megana anya megana lugar wi gahagi no esta lina humuzong na sagan padang ja si Terrin Flores esti membro ni board no pumunta huzong na edyo na lugar umbanda na mahahat sa Nuevo na base na sagan padang edyo na lugar pues debya loki di ta sangani mangongolo mangahuhulo siya na pamaguon na propio na anya esti na lugar di Fino CHamoru dan tasigi elected, we're not renaming it, we're just correcting the names, and so that's all basically we're doing. And Elyssa is staffing the Kumision Lugar, and of course Robert is taking the lead, and we're going to be using digital technology to get into the mapping parts of this. So I'll leave it to Robert and Elyssa to, extemporate a bit more on the mapping strategies. Jesus Masi.
Algo más, senhora. Jesus Masi.
Okay, well, thank you, Senora, for leading off this conversation. The first thing to remember, I think, in this is to understand that the Kumision Fino CHamoru is the official arm of the government of Guam, has been designated as the official arm of the government of Guam for naming places. So, and then the Kumision has a place name committee, and I'm the head of that, and Elyssa is the staffer that guides us through massive information and does our basic research. So the thing to understand is, what is a place name? So people always think that everything is a place name. No, that's not exactly true. There's such things as place names. They're names for facilities. They're names for parks. They're names for streets. They're names for schools. And so place names are kind of like everything else other than that. So they're either names of rivers or mountains or places that people refer to. So it's not often clear that what you're, so that people understand. For example, just give the Governor Flores Park down in Ipoh. When they named that Governor Flores Park, it didn't change the name of Ipoh. It just refers to the park. So that's a function of the Guam legislature. The other thing that we're not involved with directly are political jurisdictions. So political jurisdictions are village names. So it's important to understand that a village name has a political function. It establishes boundaries for voting. It establishes boundaries for services. So the ability to name boundaries and villages resides in the Guam legislature. So the Kumision, Fino, CHamoru couldn't decide tomorrow that we're going to change the name of Tamuning to Underwoodville because it's just because I happen to live there. That's just not possible because it's a political jurisdiction. So those issues are presented to the Guam legislature. Of course, the Kumision wants to recommend some names, and then the Guam legislature decides that. So in the course of conducting this effort, it's important that street names remain under the control of the municipalities, the mayor and the municipal council together. Naming of schools remains under the control of the Guam Education Policy Board. And then the naming of facilities, of course, remains under the control of the government of Guam. And to the extent that federal facilities are established, they can name those facilities as well. But they can't really rename the place. But of course, there's a little bit of confusion about that over time. So that's the lay of the land. So just to give a little bit of history on this so that people sort of understand this, the Kumision is charged with trying to restore to the greatest extent possible a coherent, historically sound, and accurate set of criteria for selecting place names. That's the purpose of it. So we're responsible for ensuring, trying to, as Chairwoman Hope has pointed out, trying to restore to the greatest extent possible original names. Now, as we go through that process, you have to find out what are all the possible names for places in Guam, and that's a more complex issue. So into that, we've identified, again, through the work of Elyssa and others, we've identified about almost 1,200 names, place names, that historically have been given to some villages have like 150 names, different place names inside the village, like in Maleso and in Alahan. There's a lot of place names there. A lot of times people don't even remember what those place names are. It's only a handful of people, but they're in different documents. So we have to go through that process of revisiting those place names and then ensuring that these are the place names that people can agree on, because there might be some disagreement. And we also have to have a kind of a certain point where we can establish that this is a place name. So it's a complicated mapping process as well as naming process. Those places are not likely to generate a lot of controversy, but there are places where people are used to it that will generate a lot of controversy. So those are related to planned unit developments, as the chairwoman has pointed out. Who really has the authority over naming a place? So for the past, since the development of planned unit developments in the 60s after Typhoon Karen here, then planned unit development started. And so people used to live in Kaiser, then they lived in Old Kaiser, then they lived in Gura 501, or they lived in Gura 502, or they lived in Toto Locas. And the idea is who gets to name these places? And on what basis are they named? And do they put out of focus, of course, original names, which in fact, most of them do. Now, some of them people are quite content with. So I live in two, for most of my life, I've lived in two planned unit developments. One is Baza Gardens. So I lived in Baza Gardens. So to what extent are we going to go back and say, okay, you people live in Baza Gardens, you no longer live in Baza Gardens, you live in Malezo, or you live in Windward Hills, you live in Malezo. and now I live in Jonestown, in Tamuning. So named after Ken Jones, who had this development, which was the original development. So who gave Ken Jones the authority, or is it just common practice? Same thing up in Nimitz Hill. So you have a whole range of things related to Nimitz Hill. So should we go back to the original name, and will it be acceptable, and will it generate controversy? Are we going to say you no longer live in Nimitz Hill Estates? You live in Tiguat Estates, because that's really the original name for where Nimitz Hill Estates is. So, but because the Tiguat Public Cemetery came along later after the Nimitz Hill Estates, has a sort of a different taint to it. And if the public cemetery had never been built there, maybe people say, okay, I can go with Tiguat. But now, that might generate. And of course, the whole of Nimitz Hill would be Libugon. So that's another area likely of controversy.
Let me just jump into.
That's a lot of. There's over 1,200 place names.
No, and this is so fascinating. We have a comment already. Somebody saying that we should rename Jonestown because before people think that it's named for the infamous cult Jonestown.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, when my son, when we were living in Baza Gardens, my son said, Papa, we better go to visit Grandma and see if she's still alive, because I heard 700 people died in Jonestown. He heard it on the radio. So yeah, that's true. So there's all these kinds of things that are attached to it. But, as always, you're sort of trying to balance the relationship between the acceptability and the charge. Our charge is to offer traditional place names and to restore them to the greatest extent possible. So now you have Inalahan there on the screen. The one thing that the commission controls, regardless of what place name you use, is spelling. So it's important to understand that even if you want to keep the current name Dedido, it's not going to be spelled the same way. So when the Kumision recommends that you're going to change the name of Dedido, or we're going to reinforce Dedido, it's going to be spelled Dedidu. And that's consistent with the orthography. Now people might think that you're changing the name. No, we're just getting everybody to be coherent with the spelling. So, and of course, what we've ended up with in the village names is that there are in the villages as currently established, there are two village names, which they didn't have CHamoru in them. One was Santa Rita, well, actually three. Santa Rita, which is, of course, Spanish in origin. Tamuning, which is Carolinian in origin. And Agana Heights, which was a post-World War II settlement. So after a period of discussion, Santa Rita Sumai was offered as an option. People endorsed it, and so now we have Santa Rita Sumai. Agana Heights, we've had a couple of hearings there. People are almost universally opposed to any change. And so the question is, what is the Kumision going to recommend? Is it going to recommend, well, nothing, just leave it the way it is? Is it going to recommend a compromise like Agana Heights / Tutuhan, or Tutuhan / Agana Heights? Tutuhan is the area that comprises most of what is now Agana Heights. Not all of it. There's Apugan, there's Fonte, and there's other areas, Paasan, Fonte, and Tutuhan. We understand that. But most people who went up to live in Agana Heights after World War II said, we're moving to Tutuhan. We're moving to Agana Heights.
Oh, that's true.
But now people have forgotten that. So, and people, can, people are just people. I don't know what you can do about it. There's adherence to that. And then the actual name of Tamuning is actually Tamuning-Tuman. That's the actual legal name. So if the Kumision doesn't really have to do anything other than to say the Tamuning-Tuman should be spelled in accordance with the CHamoru orthography. And if you do that, then it'll come out Tamuning with an N-E-N-G instead of N-I-N-G, and it will be Tomhum instead of Tuman. Now that's going to create, I don't know, we'll see.
I think people need to, because think about it, all of the Tuman Bay t-shirts that you have will suddenly become collector's items. The new vintage retro style, right? It's kind of like if you have stuff from countries that changed their name, let's say you have some stuff that says truck on it.
Get your fuck guy Tuman shirts now.
But I do want to, so for those of you watching, you will see these signs. And so actually, Senora Hope's daughter, Maria, was integral in making these and also ensuring that at the bottom of them, you see a number of place names that are with areas within the village. And so oftentimes, people notice, of course, the beautiful imagery on these signs. Like for Inalahan here, there's Igimadzu San Jose, Inizuk, the pictographs, right? But then underneath, you will see all of these places that are within the village, right? Like, what are the places in Alahan? Asiga. I think Malolo is included as the place in there, but I know that Malolo people have
Malolo Dandan
sometimes.
Sagamin Lago.
Sagamin Lago is where the petroglyphs are.
And so, these signs are underutilized because a lot of people sort of don't realize that, because I know that Maria used what had been collected previously by the Kumision Fino CHamoru in the Naani Lugat Siha, sort of that book, to sort of fill them in there. And so, if you're unfamiliar with some of these areas, a lot of them are on the village signs that have already been put up. And so that's actually, I wanted to share sort of, here we go. So you had mentioned some of the disagreements, right? And so that for the most part, villages had been sort of open to talking about it or eager to sort of change, right? So that now, sort of officially, Maleso, Humatak, Haget, Kalafofo in Alahan, right? So in the past, if you said it, this was just the way that CHamoru said it, but legally it was, of course, Maritzo, Yamatic, Agate, Inarahan, and so on. But then you mentioned sort of the villages that have resisted it the most, Ganya Heights and Tumuning. And so, I mean, what
I wouldn't characterize it as opposition in Tamuning, just quite yet. Yeah, because but Aganya Heights certainly.
And so I wonder if you have any thoughts on sort of because I've been curious about that too, because when I've heard people say, oh, it's never been Tutuhan, it's always been Aganya Heights, I always think that's not true. That's kind of ignoring history to kind of just to try to make a point. Because even my grandfather's family had land up there. They farmed up there before the war, and it was Tutuhan. Everyone who farmed up there referred to it as Tutuhan, even if, as you said, there were particular areas that also had other names. It was Tutuhan in general.
Yeah, and so obviously, people's memories are not very long, and they think that sometimes people invent reasons for holding on to a name. Some of it seems trivial, like we never had the Tutuhan Cougars as a baseball team. We always had the Aganya Heights Cougars as a baseball team. Doesn't seem like a compelling reason for me to name something Aganya Heights, but it does make sense for some people. So that controversy, and then interestingly, when the Aganya Heights Municipal Council decided to build a park in honor of the village, what did they call that park?
That's right, the
Tutuhan.
Tutuhan.
They called it that. It wasn't like we invented it. It was obviously in people's minds. So when you're driving up to Agana Heights, the first thing you see is the Tutuhan Park. And so, it's been around. Tamuning and Tuman, and then of course the introduction of Harmon as a location, as a place name, came also as a result of World War II, the naming of Harmon Field, and there were so many things named after Harmon. I think everybody, better know who the hell Harmon was, because you had Harmon Cliff Line, you had Harmon Field, you had the Harmon everything. You had the Harmon racetrack, the Harmon, where people are out there, and Harmon, what did they call it? Industrial area, which is actually called, so industrial park. So Harmon. So eventually, people started to kind of abbreviate it and call it Tatuhan, Tamuning, Tuman, and Harmon. But in reality, that's not its official name. Its official name is Tamuning Tuman. And so, as it's written now, so even if we did nothing except correct the orthography, it would come out Tamuning Tomhum. And I'm sure that the controversy would be over the pronunciation of Tomhum, and it will have the same kind of arguments that we heard about changing from Magana to Hagatnya. It will have life for maybe a few years, and then after a while, because it's not hard to say Tomum. I mean, it's not like impossible. I think it's harder to say Hagatnya if you're just an English speaker. I think it's harder to say Hagatnya than it is to say Tomhum. But in any event, it isn't stated very often, so people may have some issues with that.
And so we're getting some comments, some supportive, some not as supportive. And so I did want to share a comment from Elvira Smith, who says that we should keep the names the way they are. And she says, how can we share about our heritage of Guam to the people here in the States if you change the names? She says, our generation chose to be Americanized. Why should we change it?
Well, so you can still be American. I
wanted to give you a chance just to share some thoughts.
Okay, well, I think you can still be American and call it Tomum. I don't know. Or you can still be American and call it Hagatnya. But this is a process that is going on around the world. It's not like we're the only ones involved in it. If you live in the state of Hawaii, they're pretty insistent about, and last time I checked, they were a state, so they're pretty insistent about it. They're pretty insistent around the world. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's not like a open and shut case. There's nothing, of course, we want to be, what better way to teach the world about who we are than to talk about place names that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Well, depends on when. Sometimes when people look at history, they think history began when they showed up. And sometimes the history is a little bit longer than that. So
it's true. I mean, because if you're talking about sharing, then Aganya Heights, it just means it's just kind of heights as this generic sort of thing about sort of saying that a place is elevated, it's nicer than another place, Barragata Heights, Aganya Heights, Lati Heights, right? But what I always loved is Tutuhan. I always loved hearing stories about where Tutuhan comes from, right? So I remember when I took CHamoru with Peter Onodera, he said Tutuhan comes from when Chamorros who were too lazy to walk all the way around to get up to Tutuhan, they would climb the cliff instead, and they would call it Tutuhun Luhan. I'm starting to get scared, and it's kind of that's much more interesting. It's above Aganya.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and now that they changed the name to Hagatnya, why don't they call it Hagatnya Heights? So, it's but the consistency I think that we're trying to provide is to kind of reinforce these names, certainly to reinforce the CHamoru names. And there's enough controversy even in that, let alone trying to figure out, because we don't know where Fanhigadran begins and where it ends. We don't know, where Dedido, where we now, lots of confusion, not lots, but some confusion, where Dedido, the old Dedido now was actually where, like around the Micronesia Mall, the San Miguel Brewery was. That's where it was before the war. And where the old Dedido was, what we now call Old Dedido, was called Liguan. And then actually after the war, the things have been reversed. And Dedido leapfrog Liguan, because Liguan used to be to the right of Dedido, and now Liguan is to the left of Dedido, the traditional village of Dedido. So there's a lot of things, but there's a lot of history to be learned in that. And but I think that it's the people who should make that call, and the people should think about their history and think about what they're naming. It's like people. I guess every generation they get to name their children something different, But these are not our children. These are stable places. This is something that is magical when you think about it, because, like one of the place names in Inalahan is Saipan. And, to think about, well, what is the origin of Saipan inside Inalahan? And it turns out that the people who were resettled from the north were resettled in the southern villages. So after the Spanish arrived, when they resettled the people from north of Luta and north of Saipan down into Guam, they were all settled in the southern villages. That's why they named one place down there Saipan. So that's on that tells you something. It tells you something about the nature of the people and how they. What is more basic than to understand where you are in time and where you are in place? And so as we kind of move through time and space, we have to do that. So now the work, I want to point this out as well, the work that Carlos Madrid has done with some of the really older place names, from the time of when the first Spanish missionaries came here, and we're working with Elyssa. Now we're able to see where those place names would fit on a modern map, and as we see that, we can place different places, and you'll see some very magical things as a result of that. So obviously there's always going to be arguments like. Are you putting certain people out of place? I think there will be really, maybe not. Maybe I'm overthinking it, but I'm thinking that a name like Nimitz Hill would invite more controversy than changing Jonestown, because even now when I tell cab drivers that I live in Jonestown, they don't know where that is. So that memory is fading. If I tell them I live near Oka, then they go, oh yeah, I know where that is. And so there's Oka and Apotguan and, those places. But Tamuning itself is a Carolinian word, but it's been around for almost 200 years. So it's pretty much intact. And I don't know that anybody is willing to say, let's drop Tamuning and call it Apotguan.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind, but then again, I'm rootless. I'm rootless, so I'm down. But no, thank you. We have some more comments that have come in, and so we have from Jesse. He says something is broken if we are resisting original Chamorro place names. And then from Joni, we have part of becoming decolonized involves recognizing culture and language in traditional place names. And so Sidus Masi, Jesse, and Joni, as well as Elvira Sidus Masi for your comment. And I do want to emphasize to everyone watching or listening that this is a collaborative effort. as Dr. Underwood emphasized, this is not something where the Kumision is coming in and telling people, but it's talking to people and listening to people and then making recommendations based on that, right? And so I think that's a very
For
important
the
thing. Oh, go
for
ahead.
the village names, for the place names are actually under the control of the Commission. So that's a slightly different issue. Not as controversial, obviously. But nobody that's on this Zoom is the czar of place names. There's nobody's here saying you will call it this. Obviously, we spend a lot of effort thinking about it, and there's also, there's people out there with, interesting theories. Most place names in Chamorro end in AN, so there's people who say if the place name doesn't end in AN, then it's not really a Chamorro place name. Well, just because most place names end in AN doesn't mean that every place has to end in AN. So there's that too.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's a good point. I know some people who try to argue that now, that every Chamorro place has to end with AN, and it's a strange sort of argument. But before we go down that, though, I wanted to bring in Elyssa. Elyssa, go ahead. I know that you had a comment. Por favor.
Just Masi, Dr. Again, I think first off, I'd just like to acknowledge Dr. Laura Sauder and Senora Flores, who have entered the room as well. Senora Flores, as Armenian mentioned earlier, is also a part of the Guam Placement Project or the Guam Placements Committee. So welcome, Maninahu. I just wanted to respond to Senora Elvira's comment as well regarding, I guess, this issue of being anti-American and I guess this relationship to place names work. As someone who kind of works on, on the ground or receives inquiries on the front end at our office, I just wanted to mention that we actually get a lot of inquiries from Americans themselves about CHamoru placement. So, for example, Americans wanting to know about the places that they're hiking to, the places that they live in, and asking us for the proper spelling of these places, as well as how to pronounce them, because they're here, and some of them will be here temporarily, and some of them have called Guam home. So we do also get inquiries from Americans. We had an interaction with a photographer, for example, who is from the States, and she loves touring the island and taking photographs of places on Guam. And so her inquiry was about the names, or how to pronounce these place names, so that she can start to photograph them and also put them on her jewelry, right? So we get a variety of inquiries like that, as well as inquiries from the military who also want to spell and pronounce certain place names correctly. Now we can discuss their agenda clearly another time, but we do get those kinds of inquiries, as well as from teachers and from everyday citizens, even inquiries from folks who want to add the correct spelling of place names on their son's birthday invitation. So, arguably, for those patrons or those interested in the work of the Kumision, it's not simply an anti-American thing or service that we're providing. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I just hasten to add that this has nothing to do with any kind of sentiment at all like that. This is, the Kumision is recognized by the U.S. Geological Service as the place naming authority for Guam. So we have the full faith and credit of the federal government behind our efforts here. So there's nothing here about any ostensible political agendas regarding the relationship between Guam and the United States. So if people want to see that, well, they can see anything. But in reality, this is the attempt to organize something that has not been paid attention to much. Now, admittedly, there'll be some people who will hold on to place names forever. You know, how do you want to, you know, like Anderson Air Force Base? There's, you know, that's a facility. It's always going to be called Anderson Air Force Base unless they call it something else. But you can put it on a map and say, here's Anderson Air Force Base, and Anderson Air Force Base is mostly in UPI. That's not, you know, that's not renaming the base. It's just clarifying the place in which the base is located. And it's always trying to understand that that's the fundamental purpose here. And then obviously kind of interacting with people who have a lot of money or have a lot of resources and are able to create planned unit developments, housing areas, and then they somehow are entitled, or the government of Guam has allowed them to feel that they are entitled to naming the place after themselves. So we have Jonestown. And you know, I know Mr. Jones. He was a wonderful man. So it has nothing to do with Mr. Jones or his wife or his children or anything, or any kind of feelings about him one way or the other. It's just that, hey, this is an area. This is an area that's had a long series of names traditionally, and we've put them out of focus, and so we're trying to put them back into focus. The names of political entities which carry the weight of law is you know, there's things called census tracts. This is another thing that we discovered in our work with the USGS. That the Census Bureau has census tracts. Those census tracts, in effect, become place names for the island. So you have 5 or 6 census tracts in Dededo, and they're named after, one is named after Ipapao. There are other census, there's Ipapao 1, Ipapao 2, and so that again presents an opportunity to clarify those census tracts so that when the census people conduct it, they become more familiar with the original place names. There's also, you know, you find things like before the war, Machanao was its own district. It existed independent of Dededo or Jigo. Then after the war, Machanao became sort of part of Dededo. And then all of a sudden, a new area popped up called Machanano. And then we're trying to, like, where the heck did Machanano come from? Did Machanao have an offspring, and now it's called Machanano? And so, you know, that's sort of on the Jigo side of the house. So those are interesting things. And but I think and obviously there's some things that people like, you know, they want to call it Barragata Heights, Lati Heights, you know, nobody want to call it, you know, I live in Barragata Depths. I live in Barragata Flatland. So we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot, and we're learning a lot of history through it. And that's the purpose of this. It's not just pride. It's really about learning your own history. And, you know, there's going to be obviously some compromises made, and there's obviously going to try to figure out what the relationship is between a place name and its history and how people see it today. I would also add that the street names, and this is sort of a preview of coming attractions, because I think the Kumision is going to be a little bit more insistent on this as well, is that street names are under the control of the mayors and the municipal council, but spelling is not. So, you know, if you're going to name Suni Lane, it can't be S-U-N-E in Santa Rita and S-U-N-I in Deredo. It's got to be one or the other. And one is going to have to give it up. And so that's another kind of like a regulatory function. Now, I will hasten to add that this kind of controversy is rampant in many parts of the states. In our work with, and Elyssa knows this, in our work with the USGS, we found out that the naming of that woman, Sakagagiwa. How do we say her name again? The Indian woman, huh? The Indian woman who was the guide in the Lewis and Clark.
For Lewis and Clark.
In the Lewis and Clark expedition. So we found out that her name is spelled 3 different ways in 3 different states. And each state insists that their way is the correct way, and USGS is having a hard time trying to get them to accept one. So, this is just sort of like the mixture of obstinance and, some sense of control. But in this instance, I think it's pretty clear that we should follow the spelling rule.
Oh, thank you for that reminder, though, that because I think many people assume sort of whenever there's something on Guam that they don't like, then this must be the only place where it's happening. We must be the only people who have these issues. And it's like, no. And I want to remind everybody that even this issue of people say, why should we name it? Why should we change it? And so on. This is part of increased self-governance. This is taking control of things which were denied more people for hundreds of years. Is that you weren't allowed to do any of these things. You weren't allowed to, you could talk about it amongst yourselves, but sort of the circuits of power on the island were outside of your control for the most part. But now, after sort of other people naming things for us for so long, whether in good faith, in bad faith, in ignorance, ultimately naming things for us, we have a point where we get to start to have these conversations. And we get to, as Dr. Underwood was mentioning, it doesn't have to be harsh, it doesn't have to be sort of like destabilizing. It can be fun, it can be interesting, it can be engrossing and enriching, especially when talking about place names, right? Sort of learning sort of the histories in which, even just the stories tied to the land that we can find in those place names, right? And that some of these stories may only be for one family, they only may be for a few families, they may just be for a village, right? But I think that there's a lot of power sort of in beauty in that.
And there's a lot of community knowledge out there that we haven't tapped into. So the work with Elyssa is to work with informants as well. So we're working with informants, and then when they're doing next week when they're doing the genealogy conference, and we're going to have a lot of people attend the genealogy conference. These are people who are very interested in their families and their origins of their families. I bet you those people have a lot of knowledge about place names as well, because they'll think of their families in terms of where they live. If they share that knowledge with us, and they share that knowledge with the Kumision, and we hope, I know that Elyssa is preparing a display there, and we hope that they share their knowledge with us. I think it will be enriching and not confusing. It's not, the effort here is not to confuse. The effort here is to enrich. So I get and of course, many of you have experience with the state of Hawaii, and those Hawaiian place names are probably a little bit more difficult to say than many CHamoru place names, but they're pretty insistent upon it, and the level of insistence upon it is clear when you hear it on newscasts or you hear any formal thing. So that's what happens. So I'm glad to see that already in newsprint here, at least in printed, people are saying Santa Rita Sumai. So-and-so passed away, he's from Santa Rita Sumai. Now, that wouldn't have been thought of 2 years ago. And already now we're just taking it for granted. So yes. That's the power of that. And in doing that, we remember Sumai. So Sumai is no longer buried in our consciousness. Now we know that there was a place, Sumai, it's being used and it's being transmitted, and people will tell the story of what is Santa Rita, what is Sumai. And I think the same thing will happen with Tamuning and Tomhom, and I think the same thing will happen with Tutuhan and Agana Heights. People should have the opportunity to hear that story. And I think it'd be very engaging.
No, thank you so much. And Elyssa, I wanted to ask you now to sort of go into provide some information on the outreach that is being done. And while you're talking, I'll share. I've posted the link onto the live stream, but so if you want more information and resources on the Kumision ni Naan Lugat Guahan, Guam Place Names Commission, there's plenty of information there, including what Dr. Underwood was referencing in terms of the laws involved and their plans. And so, Elyssa, put for what?
So just Maasi. So as far as outreach, moving forward, our work will continue. As Dr. Underwood mentioned, we continue to do a lot of in-house research as well as collaborative work with village informants, and that list of informants is growing, right? Every time we connect with another SINA or a community member. So we want to keep that going. And he already put in a plug for the genealogy workshop. So it's events like this that we hope to encourage people to come, give us feedback on the place names that we have researched and we have entered in our database, as well as any new names that we may have forgotten or have missed, or simply just don't know about, right? So that's going to continue. And basically what we want to do eventually with this information is to produce both web maps and print maps, right? So web maps that could be used for classroom use, right? So, students and teachers can go in and kind of map out trails and other things using the place names maps that we have. So we're generating that with where we are CUOG. So basically just the creation of various educational resources from maps and recordings as well. You may have already seen some of our PSAs or audios circulated about how to pronounce village names. We hope to share one as well on how to pronounce the CHamoru words for certain geographical features. So just basically generating those tools. And should funding be made available, we hope to coordinate some projects with youth as well as other community organizers to do some village mural projects. Dr. Underwood had the great idea of painting on place names right at bus stops so that the students can interact with them on a daily basis or on a weekly basis.
I love that. I love that, especially because nowadays they probably just name it for whoever sponsored the painting, right? This is the Home Depot. Oh, I'll meet you at the Home Depot stop, or oh, I'll meet you at the National Guard stop, or
Right. I mean, we're already seeing, CHamoru words painted on murals around the island of Amapa Day, and things like that. But as opposed to just greetings, we should be also sharing and highlighting our place names, right? And if not just mural projects, hopefully creative projects with local artists and poets that will allow community members to submit pieces about their connection to this, or even a photography. So we're thinking of some creative approaches as well.
And just to add to that, and Elyssa and I worked on this with the Water Environmental Research Institute, is they name all the water springs on the island, the ones that are above the aquifer. And so we worked with them because they just named them to whatever, like the Anderson Air Force Base water basin. So we got them to change the name. So now those names of the water basins are now all CHamoru place names for the most part. I think all of them, no, Elyssa? I think all of them have CHamoru place names now that are associated with the water basins. So now, when those are taught as teaching materials in science classes, they're going to see those names. They're going to see what the construct of the aquifer. And, we worked with Dr. Nate Habana on that. And so I want to credit him with that because he was really keen on it. And so, who knew? Who had the authority to name those water basins? See, that's the thing. So, well, apparently they have the authority because they've been preparing the maps for years. So now we worked with them, and so now all these water basins have Chamorro names. Great, it's great feeling, because now when the students are studying the aquifer and they're studying the water lens and they're studying the natural resources of the island, they'll associate it with Chamorro places.
And then just to add,
I mean, yeah, or think about how there's so many random streets in Hagatnya for people that we have no idea who they were, but it's meant to honor somebody in the States, somebody in Spanish history, right? And it's just this relic of it's just this disjointed relic, right?
Well, it's like Gibson Highway and Fahrenheit here. In fact, Narissa was just asking me this morning, where the hell is Fahrenheit and who is Fahrenheit? But there's a bunch of addresses there on Fahrenheit right here down the street. So,
And so, Elyssa, go ahead.
well, as you can see, education is a huge part of our mission, right, and our goal. So just to add one more note about outreach, we're continuing our school visits. So Dr. Underwood and I, we've already given a number of presentations to the schools about the Guam Place Use efforts and some available maps. And the one that he's referring to, that Dr. Dana helped us create, along with others, are accessible on our website. So for any viewers out there who are interested in the products we've already produced, you can go ahead and visit our website.
Sidus Masi. And so we have some people that are asking too about the genealogy conference, and I know that Kumision is partnering with Bernard Pansalan and CHamoru Roots, and so if anyone can provide some information on that, I've put it into the live stream. Sort of,
maybe Dr. Sauter can talk to that. So if she's paying attention.
Hungen, we have a.
She's here.
Or maybe the chair could talk a little bit about that.
Again, put for what, Senora?
Well, I wasn't at the meeting yesterday, but we came up. There is a program. It's actually a 2-day a workshop presentation. And we've invited many of our Chamorro families who have already done work on their genealogy. We've invited presenters. Where are you? Is that you rolling?
Yeah.
I see.
Hungen, who pepega gi screen.
Dispensa dos. Halanon hongang nyay honzo. Pues, bula interesado pa na tiempo piori man hoben. Guru man spia mas information put man ginin manu siya magi, man ginin manu iguala niya. Place names is also playing a big role here. And that's why really Elyssa is mainly staffing this because she's the most knowledgeable staffer in this area. And so we are going to have many presentations by genealogists themselves, like Dr. Leon Guerrero, who has already written a couple books on her family genealogy. And Elyssa must know that program that Dr. Sauter has helped put together. You can probably speak to that, Elyssa.
Ahungan, Senora, so yes, it is a 2-day conference. We have a number of guest speakers who will be presenting on various topics as well. I know that Dr. Sauter is one of the speakers, as well as Ms. Gillette Leon Guerrero, Simon Maria Ramirez, and a bunch of other representatives from other government entities like the Guam Museum, the Commission on Recall, and then some other community members in Mr. Punzalan's team. Day 2 is really exciting because that will include the hands-on genealogy lab experience. So we're really grateful that Mr. Punzalan is loading us a variety of materials for the folks who registered for that component. As the flyer says, if you'd like to register, please visit that link. And if you have any other inquiries, you can email the Kumision or me specifically at esantoskumision@gmail.com.
There's also registration on our website. So if you can go to our website and register there to attend, we'd like to know ahead of time how many people are going to be coming. It is going to be at the GCC multi-purpose conference room. And just so that everybody knows, it's from 9 in the morning to around 4 in the afternoon. So please go to our website and register there. Yeah, and I know it's almost closing time, Miguel.
Yeah, and you'll find out that we're all related. That's the point of that. So that's the beauty of that. If you go to that and you pay attention to the genealogy of it, you'll find your connections, multiple connections. Okay.
So
That's
I
true.
just wanted
Al
to
fin una
share
familia.
that I am also researching my family name history. So I've already done that, and
Yeah.
we hope we get to that point where our children today are going to be able to go to a historical research center, a dream of mine, where our kids can find who they were related to in our history, the place name of their ancestors. I've been able to do that just from my Navarro family.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, wonderful. That's why I always tell young people, I say, if you know, and ginuntungu e haletmo e familiamo, you know, even if there's only one other CHamoru in the state that you're living in, you
You'll
will
find a connection.
You'll find a connection.
You will
The
find a
CHamoru world
connection.
is small. It's very
That's
small.
why if you're
Or
young,
you
we
know,
always
the
ask
closer it
you,
feels.
Hadzi Manaynamu, Hadzi Nanamu, Hadzi. We're always going back to who were your parents and what's your family name.
Again, and I always tell kids, even if you don't know your family name, then just get together and make up a family name. So you'll have one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Many
Just
to go.
because I don't like it when they say, "Oh, my family name is we're the Cruz family," and I'm like, there's a musical group called the Cruz family, but what is your clan in the Cruz? Oh, we're the Leon Guerrero clan of the Cruz, and I'm like, no. But anyway, dispensa. But
Yeah.
yes, so
All right. Yeah, no problem.
Information is on CHamoruRoots.com and the Kumision's website on how to sign up to the genealogy workshop, which is happening next week. I do want to give a final chance, Señor or Elyssa, to share with people where they can, if they want to share their knowledge, sort of their village knowledge, their family knowledge. How can they get in touch? How can they go about this?
Liz?
Okay. So there's several ways to do that. Clearly, you can just call us and email us if you're interested, or connect with your village mayors, because we are in contact with them. We tend to recommend more village informants, right, that they feel would be able to provide us that information. At the same time, you can also go on our website, and we have some portals to basically like public testimony sheets and other forms that you can fill out if you'd like to submit that. So we really are trying to cater to those who both like to reach out to us or work with us electronically, or to those who prefer communicating and documenting hard copy with us. So several options there. Or visit us at our office. We're located now in Niguas, so we're happy to host and greet you.
Oh, Biba.
Yeah. Wow. A legitimate office. Who knew?
Biba, and I'll be sure to put the website link on the live stream where people can reach out. But Señor Underwood, ko gua ultimo na sinangan mo por
Yeah, okay. Well, agradeço esta oportunidade no Miguel no para nós conseguir explicar mais que público a fazer possível responsabilidade mami como a Comisión Fino CHamoru por na lugar gunige isla. It's a very important responsibility, and it's one that's frequently misunderstood, and maybe people don't value it. But there's nothing dearer to anyone. Any kind of document that you have about yourself is going to put a date, a name, and a place, and that really encompasses who you are as an individual. And so the place is very, very significant. So the naming of places and the sense of identity are wrapped up in those places. So I think Guam has a very rich history. Much of it has been disguised. Much of it has been put out of focus, I guess is the best way to put it. Not really disguised, just put out of focus because of different powers taking over. One of the first things that the Japanese did in the Japanese occupation is they renamed all the villages. I mean, they thought they were going to be here for a long time, but all of a sudden they just remapped everything. And that's the essence of control. When you're able to manage and control some other place, and how do you provide evidence of that? You give it a name, and you name it after yourself. So thankfully we are not Omiyajima, and Hagatnya is not Akashi. Aganya is now Hagatnya, and one day Guam will be Guahan. Thank you.
Biba. Si Diyos masi. Si Diyos masi. Si Diyos masi, Senora Hope, Senora Laura, and Estabaguini, si Senora Teresita Loquigini, Iman member ni Kumision. Si Diyos masi, Elyssa, for helping to organize this episode. And now, Parapago, adios. Este Kimana.